everybody, it's Claire, and I just decided to do a quick and dirty PowerPoint for this particular assignment for our eLearning Evaluation 1 in our fabulous MSIDT 520 Instructional Design 1 Issues in eLearning the Design Process course. Woohoo! So let's get going. So just wanted to clarify, my e-learning checklist is specifically for a Mondly lesson in German. And Mondly is super cool. If any of you have never tried it, it's a lot like Duolingo. It's very gamified. The one thing you should be aware of is that you do have to create an account to use it, and you can do that via Google or whatever your current account is, but it's pretty easy. So I'm covering a lot of general points here, and I'll get more specific about each of them. The first is instructional design. What a shock. The next is graphic design. The next is user interface and visual communication, and then a final additional comments and summary. If this looks familiar, you might remember this similar template from 505 with Dr. Carmona, so I adapted that for my own personal checklist. So let's look at each of these. So instructional design. So what did they do well? Well, the content and the activities were really, really awesome. First of all, one thing they really did that I liked was that they used a lot of English cognates so that you could kind of guess what the word would be if you didn't know. So for example, mother, which of these looks most like mother, Mutter, right? So that was really smart. And they had tons of these types of practices, and not a final assessment, but all of these were basically assessments in the end, and they really supported the learning. The e-learning was sequenced in a logical way that facilitated the students' learning, and the inclusion of diverse groups, it was also considered and represented. So you can see that here with the groups of different kinds of people we see. And the multimedia really supported learning and was well integrated. I'll show you a few examples of how they did that. The one thing I think they missed was to state what the learning objective was. Like, what are you going to be learning in this particular lesson? And I think that would have been helpful to prepare the learner. Now on to graphic design. So in terms of what I saw here, there was great visual consistency throughout the object in terms of color, fonts, etc. Visual layouts make good use of the space, and there were no readability issues that I saw. Grammar and spelling were all correct, which is important when you're teaching a language. And graphics and visuals were appropriate and added to the learning experience. Graphics were all high quality and not pixelated. This was a cool feature as well. Usually you are talking to an actual person in terms of graphics, but then there was also the opportunity to learn more about, for example, conjugations of verbs. And I really enjoyed that because I'm always interested to learn more about whatever's already there. So that was pretty cool, I thought, on their part, trying to just provide the learner with more opportunities to learn. On to visual communication. Got a couple slides for this. So in this case, what they did really well, visual cues are used to guide attention, animation, highlighting, bold fonts, everything was really well aligned there. Visual cues were used consistently. I'll show you that in a moment. And interactive elements are styled consistently. Animations add meaning to the learning or navigational experience. So this was really great, I thought. What they had here was, in terms of visual communication, that this person who was actually speaking the phrase in German that you're supposed to complete, and then has it translated to English. Once again, mother, you can see the word here that's probably the easiest to figure out is Mutter. So this was a drag or a click. Either one worked in this case, which was cool. Then a little more about the visual communication. So this was an actual drag, and you had to drag each word in order in this case. So I thought that was really smart. And they have the word in German, this sentence, pardon me, in German this time, which again she reads in German. And then you have to know what it is in English. So it was a good use of sort of a flip of the previous slide. So once again, Schwester. What word looks most like Schwester? Sister, right, in English? So once again, great use of cognates on their part. And then you can check it. And if you don't get it right, you have the opportunity to do it again, which is really great. And then assessment. So how did they assess whether you learned it or not? This was kind of cool. So they had all of these practice checks, like the types I showed you. And then at the end, they not only told you, hey, yay, you completed the lesson, but they also showed you and read all of these phrases that are floating around on the screen, which I thought was very clever. It's good use of visual plus written, and that really helps learners learn better according to what we're reading right now. And it made me, again, think of practice making perfect. Does it actually? It's another question. I can address that later. But certainly practice, if the learning is correct, is going to help the learner, and you get a lot of chance to do that here. And then a final assessment where you're able to see what you learned. I thought that was pretty great. Then summary. So things I thought that this learning object did well, and things that I think could have been improved. So the pros, excellent use of gamification. It really reminded me a lot of Duolingo, and I think this is also something where you can have it as an app on your phone. Great use of graphic design and inclusivity. Great use of cognates in English so that you can kind of guess what it's going to be even if you don't know for sure. Assessments all supported learning. Couple cons. So account creation needed. You may see that as a pro or a con. It's just an extra step. Learning objectives were not clearly defined necessarily before the lesson. It would have been helpful to just know what those were so that you knew what you were trying to learn. And accessibility could be an issue for some learners in terms of text size, I noticed. So something just to be aware of. But other than that, I thought this was an excellent learning object and really, really fun to take part in because of the gamification aspect. Thank you.